Greetings, friends. It's Dr. Marcia McFee in the Worship Design Studio, and I am with Susan Robb, the author of The Angels of Christmas. And I'm so excited to be having a conversation with her because we are of like mind around the Angels of Christmas. When I saw that she was writing a book of that name and it just dropped this week. Congratulations, Susan.
Thank you.
And noticed that it went right along with our series called Angels Among Us. I thought, what a wonderful opportunity to get the word out to more churches about this worship series and book combination now that's going to make a wonderful full package of worship and small group study. So thank you so much, Susan, for being with us.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's so good to see you, Marcia, finally, like face to face on
Right.
Zoom, but sort of in person. It's
That's
good to
right.
be with you today.
Well, Susan and I have discovered that we have a common background in the arts. And so, it makes sense to me that one of the things that we would both be attracted to is the symbolism in the story, the Advent Christmas story, and especially the symbolism of these messengers. So we're going to talk a little bit today about both the worship series and the book. And we want to encourage you to consider both of these things for your Advent experience this year. So, Susan, I want to start with just a little story about when I created this series back in 2017. So a lot of churches have done this, but a lot of churches haven't. We have a lot of new subscribers to the Worship Design Studio, and people have never done our series. So I'm super excited because I can tell you that the churches who did this when it first launched back then had a ball with it. And it's one of our most popular series. So back then, I was going through a lot of changes in my life, and I was dealing with some fear. And so, as an artist, as you know, Susan, if we're dealing with something in our own lives, oftentimes the best thing to do is to actually write about it or create about it. And so I decided that I would look at the angels of Christmas because they, as we know, keep saying, do not be afraid, do not be afraid. And so what is this about that message? And it's such a prevalent message in the scriptures that do not be afraid. And so I really looked at that, and it was very healing to actually create around, those stories, because I got to really dive into it. What about that message, do not be afraid, touched you?
Gosh, it touched me in so many ways because, as you know, every time the angels appear, the first thing out of their mouths to whoever they're speaking to is, do not be afraid. And I think it speaks to the circumstance that the people who are hearing the message are in, but it also speaks to our circumstances as well. So obviously, when you're confronted by an angel, you would naturally be a little afraid, perhaps. But if you think about what the angels are asking of all of these people, then that the message is, don't be afraid. God is with you. Emmanuel, God is with you. You don't need to be afraid. You are favored. So Mary is probably afraid because she has no idea what is coming, how she's going to navigate this life that's before her. And the angels, do not be afraid, one, as of my presence. But then the next part is, do not be afraid by what God is about to do in your life and through you in the world.
Yeah.
And that's the
right.
same for Joseph and the shepherds.
Right.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah. So it's kind of a double meaning there. It's like, don't be afraid right now. Don't freak out. I know that this is scary, this moment, but also, this is a life-changing moment. And so do not be afraid, because this life-changing moment will send you to places that you never imagined. And there will be blessings in that. So one of the things that struck me about studying fear is this idea of our own agency, our own ability to move through whatever we're facing. And so Advent is typically we kind of latch onto this idea of waiting. And I think that there's a difference between passive waiting and active waiting. And the passive waiting is waiting for the circumstances around us to change so that life can get better, so that we can be not afraid. But the active waiting, and it seems to be that the angels of the stories are calling us to this active waiting, is that, you know what, this is an ongoing story. This is God's story, and you're part of it.
Absolutely.
And so you're going to play a role in that. And that really was what got me to thinking that this focusing on the angels is not about just like, cute little Hallmark cherubs,
Right.
but really looking at how we can be angels in the world, messengers of good news, and those who help to bring about that good news, and that there are angels all around us who do the same thing for us.
Exactly. I think we tend to look at and what I loved about doing this book is it's so often, especially in the gospel stories, Matthew focuses on Joseph's story and Luke focuses on Mary's story. But when we think of it oftentimes the birth narratives through the eyes or the lens of Mary and Joseph. But the angels, we often think of just play this sort of kind of sideline role. They show up, they make an announcement, they leave. And that's not really the case. Their role as messengers is vital. Yeah. And even though they don't say much, what they say is powerful. One thing that I think is truly meaningful is when Gabriel appears to Zechariah, and Zechariah doesn't quite get it. And Gabriel says, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God," which means that these messages that the angels bring to us are really messages straight from God. And we should heed those as if God was speaking in God's own self. So I think that their role is pivotal, not only in announcing, don't be afraid, but they always announce who Jesus is in so many different beautiful words and the importance of that. And then finally, as you said, they are messengers, but they really call all of us. They call the people they were speaking to in the birth narratives, and they call us to action.
Yeah.
To be those messengers and to recognize those other messengers around us too.
I love that you brought up the Gabriel saying, "I am Gabriel," and then you put after that, you say, "Let that sink in, Jeremiah or Zechariah."
Yeah.
Let that sink in for a moment, because Gabriel would have been a name of an angel that Zechariah, whose scriptures are the Hebrew scriptures, would have recognized, and like that would have been like, whoa. Right?
Daniel, he would have known that the angel Gabriel is the angel that appeared to Daniel, and like, oh, that's who you. Oh, okay, yeah.
This is kind of a big deal. Okay. So one of the things that I did in the worship series, which was so much fun, was I used a translation called The Voice, which was done in a dialogical way. So it already has sort of some of the characters broken out, and then I adapted that as well. And so what's fun about the scriptures in the worship series and the way that they're done is that you can get lots of people involved, and the person or the persons. And I suggest that you use several different people throughout the series. That kind of gets to that, that we're all called to be angels. But one of the things we suggest is that you just make a notebook that they're going to read their parts out of with some feathers on it, right? So it's like instantly, you can swoop in with your feathered notebook and proclaim, "I am Gabriel." And it's so much fun. Churches have had so much fun with this, and interpreted it in so many different ways. But this reminds me of something that I love about your book, and that is that you seamlessly move between various contexts to help us get into the subject. you seamlessly go between the biblical context, like we've just been talking about, the angels in the Hebrew texts, as well as those in the birth narrative and how that's related. Such great connection. The social and political context of the day, the repeated oppression of the Jewish people and how that figures into this story. You then weave in cultural context from Charlie Brown, Charlie Brown's Christmas, to something very serious like 9/11 and many, many different cultural references. But you also talk about the communal context, the context of our times. You wrote this during this pandemic, and that makes a big difference for how we, yearn for some good news. And then you also use personal examples from your life that invite us, to think about our own connections. Because every time I read a personal story of yours, I was able to ask myself, what's my personal story in relationship to this? So it's just beautifully woven. And so thank you for all of that.
Well, and thank you. Well, and thank you. I'm so glad that you contacted the publisher and that they contacted me, and that we're partnering on this, because I think it's so important. I love the way that you took the story of the angels and that you've woven in the themes of Advent of hope, joy, peace, and love and life into each week of the study, and you've woven that into how that meshes with the angels' messages. And then, of course, as I've looked through the products that you have sent on what your Advent worship preparation is all about, the fact that, as I appreciate that, because I've been a preacher for years, and you're always wondering, like, how am I going to make this come to life? How can I get more people involved in the community? How do I relate this to children? And you've taken care of all of that so that the preacher does not have to worry about anything, which is just amazing to me. If I just here's all of this resource dropped in your lap as to how you can prepare for Advent, and it's just amazing. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you. And I that's really my call to ministry is helping pastors and worship teams, because, worship is not the only thing they do, in their ministry. And so they're wearing all the hats. And so if I can help with these worship resources and, give you a boost, but I tell you what, the addition of your book to the sermon fodder notes that I wrote, and it's uncanny how we're on the same plane. The addition of your book is just, talk about fodder for preaching. It's all right there. And the context that I talk about, if preachers just look at those things, that's an outline for a sermon right there, right? Biblical, social, political, cultural, communal, and personal contexts. And that's your outline for your sermon. So, it's just such a delight to be resourcing folks and seeing what people do with it, because they adapt it for their own context. And it's just amazing. We get pictures from churches all over. And the anchor image, the main metaphor, I call it, for every series is feathers in this one. Right. And it's just amazing what churches have sent back. Like feathers just kind of dropped in the aisle as if an angel had just passed through, so delightful. An angel decal or mural outside the church so that people can take their pictures with these wings, and throughout the series, we invite people each week to do hashtag more hope, more peace, more, use these hashtags, because that's kind of a fun, like, cultural equivalent. Like, angels would have loved hashtags back then for their social media accounts.
That's right.
So it's just such a delight. So I want to talk about one thing. You have 4 chapters, and I want to just alert worship teams, preachers, to the fact that in your chapter 3, you have both, you focus on Joseph, and that's both times that Joseph encounters an angel. So before the birth and after the birth.
Right.
And so those of you who are doing the worship series, I put the story of Joseph encountering the angel after the birth in the Sunday after Christmas, of course. So you'll want to reference that third chapter of Susan's for both of those services, because you write about both of those, which makes total sense in terms of, it's Joseph and his story of encountering those angels. Yeah. So that's just a little tip for folks. But finally, what I'd love to do is to, I want to read just a little excerpt from your book. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. This really is the crux. And it is in that chapter 3, you say, Joseph's story makes me wonder sometimes, especially during this season, if I am doing all that I can to protect that which has been born to me and in me, as fiercely as I would if the lives of my own children were at risk. There is much at risk in our world today. There is much that seeks to threaten and destroy the light of Christ in the world. Our television screens continue to be full of violence. Political wrangling and division abound. Refugees are on the move around the globe, fleeing violence, hunger, and the effects of climate change. Our anti-social media pages are oceans of toxicity. Sometimes I have to pause and ask myself, do I contribute to that, or do I seek to be transformed in a way that brings transformation to those around me? That's powerful. I get verklempt just rereading that. But that really, I think, is the crux of the reason to do this series and study with the book, because of this context that we're living in.
Exactly. I mean, and we all, I know when and minister, any preacher who's watching knows it. Yeah. And we all know that so many people come to Christmas expecting it to be perfect and it all be light and laughter. And we all know that Mary and Joseph came into a Christmas that wasn't very light. There was a lot of darkness in the world, and yet the light of Christ came into the world. And that's what we're here to do. And that's what Joseph, you're talking about chapter 3, it's about Joseph, the call to the angel for him to protect this child. Yeah. And that is our one of our callings as well, is that to protect that which has been born to and in us in the season and in our lives. And it takes a lot of courage to do that.
Yeah.
So it's, and when I pose the question, sometimes I wonder, am I contributing to that which is extinguishing the light, trying to extinguish the light of Christ? Yeah. Or am I protecting in my deeds that I do day to day? Am I helping to protect the Christ child that's been born into the world? And I think I went on to say, if I'm being honest, the answer to both questions is yes. And it really calls us to ponder what our actions produce in the world and how we're living out and answering the call of the message of the angels.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the messages we put into the world have an effect. They have a ripple effect. And so what are those messages that we bring? Wow. It's just, I'm so excited for folks who are going to do this combination small group study and worship series. And we will look forward to seeing all that you do with it, hearing what you have done with it, the messages that come out of it, and how it affects your communities. We pray light and more hope, more peace, more joy, more love for all of you. And thank you so much for all you do on behalf of God's people.
Amen.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Marcia. It's been such a pleasure being with you.